Okay, I'm sharing a video from a webcam here at DGS headquarters, just a very simple top-down view of some models so we can use them to talk about. And it's a little after 8, so I'll get started. The plan is this all was generated by questions about cavalry models and their value and how to use them in games and all sorts of things. So I want to address that. I'd like the folks that had questions specifically about that to take the lead in terms of let's get their questions answered first and kind of have that run about an hour. And then I will stay on if people want to chat about whatever, or take that to another level, or um, open up into a broader aperture in terms of what we talk about after an hour's gone by. Just a couple things so we don't get off topic and get too far off the beaten path of what we're talking about. We don't typically discuss the details of the point system outside of the company. Just so you know why, and a little bit of my background so you understand where I'm coming from. I've been doing this a little while, and some people won't probably want to hear this, but by definition, all point value systems in all games are completely arbitrary. Any game designer tells you they figured the science out, and they got it knocked out to the nth decimal point is a liar, and it's really easy to prove. So it's a best guess is all it's ever going to be. There might be a little bit of math and science behind it, but ultimately it's just an art component as well. So what we do, or what we did, is we built a system that kind of got to where we thought, a good start point was, and we play tested into place over about, I don't know, 12, 15 years from when it very first started. And so what we're not going to do here, especially in the first hour, is argue about whether this thing that's supposed to be so many points is worth this thing that's supposed to be so many points. You can get around the edges of that if you want to be a playtester, and I'm sure Colin will take more help in that area. But even then, we will take reports on whether something's worth a certain point value or, that kind of thing. And you will be able to, at some point when we release the conversion rule, which we're working on very steadily, it allows you to convert a model in and out of Brightsword and Freeblades, be able to reverse engineer some things. But a complaint that, parry or magic or hit and run or whatever isn't worth or is worth too much is for the off-topic channel, I guess. So ultimately, a player has to make their own decision about whether something's worth it to them, and that's not what we're here to do. So if we talk about Cavalry for a while, at the end you go, man, this still doesn't seem like it's worth it. You're perfectly free to make that call. That's awesome. So anyway, let me. I think it's Brad and/or Ben had the questions about Cavalry, so I want to let them ask or set the stage for what the number one thing we want to look at is, and then we'll take it to the ground. So, what was the original discussion? Don't know how to use them. Want to see them in certain situations. How do people use them? What's the starting point for that?
I guess the biggest starting point was that the only value I see in Mounted is the additional movement and can't be knocked down, which are other than the movement, the getting knocked down doesn't happen that frequently, at least not in our games. So I was just trying to figure where's the value add for the extra gold when you have all of the same talents, mounted or unmounted. So I'm guessing it's probably because we're just using the mounted cavalry wrong, or we're not understanding the tactics that should be there, being new to wargaming.
Sure. So let's talk about that. So so we're gonna talk about what to do with cavalry. Like I said, ultimately, that's not worth it. It's up to somebody else. I have those views about other people's games. It's perfectly acceptable to have that view or views like it with our game. Play styles, individual preferences, the kinds of models you like to paint and play with. All those things factor into a person's valuation, and we cannot make that decision for somebody. But if we talk about these models in terms of being mechanical, design paper dolls, right? The difference between a model on foot and a model that's mounted without any other things being attached to them, right? Are one, the speed, true statement. Them not being able to knock down, as you point out, is on the fringes. It doesn't happen often enough. Although the model I subdued the other night with my stalker would probably agree, because he charged him with knocking on his ass. I proceeded to stab him vigorously. But you're right, it does not happen that often. To be a consequential element of the point value of cavalry not being knocked down is not high on that list. It's the speed, right? The size of the base obviously is different. That can be an advantage and it can be a disadvantage. If you are trying to make the most out of your speed, obviously, if you're in a place with a lot of close spaces between terrain features or a lot of rough terrain, that can be a detriment. It can also be a good thing if you're trying to block somebody from getting somewhere. So that's generally a wash. It's probably as useful as it is constraining, depending on the situation, and the player's got to be the one kind of putting the thing in the position to be successful. So if you just took these things as naked stat lines, it's true that if I built a model with defense 4, armor 2, a dagger, everything was D6s, one was mounted, one wasn't. The only difference in their value from a valuation standpoint would be the speed and the size of the base. But the trouble with that from a game design standpoint is these things never exist in a vacuum. They never exist that way. And that's another thing that people that know me know I'm not a big fan of. I'm not a big fan of what's known in the industry as theory crafting. That's the idea of discussing the potential outcomes of a model or game element's ability to do a certain thing, usually in terms of a combination of rules or possibly exploiting a perceived rules loophole. And this is one person's perspective. If I could give the game industry some advice, theory crafting will get you killed because, I was a competitive gamer for 40 years and I made a career out of eating theory crafters. So, not because they're dumb, they're smart people and they're great gamers, but the issue is it's a myopic focus. You get zoomed in on this thing. I got the ultimate combination. If I fire this laser at this mirror and bounce it off of the moon and it hits this other model, they're totally going to be devastated. Except that, that situation requires a great deal of effort to put into place. And it's taking into account nothing else about the table, the terrain, what scenario you're playing, the models that are on both sides, and your opponent's knowledge of the same combination and what they can do to, interrupt what you're trying to do and throw you off your game. So, kind of if we zoom in on a foot model and a cavalry model of the same, talent structure, melee attack rating, weapon, and the only difference is the mounted guys got speed 10 instead of speed 7, then it looks like maybe I'm not getting the most out of that. Although, if you had two guys with exactly the same stat line, except that one was mounted, you're not really paying that much more for just the speed. Generally speaking, the cavalry model is going to have something on it that synergizes with their speed to make them useful. In the case of a marauder, a Grular Marauder, we got one on the table here in this is the top of the view there. It has both light cavalry, which you can't get on foot by definition, and harasser, which you can get, elusive and harasser you can get on foot, but of course you can't do it over the same space that the marauder can. And so somebody can come up and charge my marauder, and then I can use my elusive to break off from them. And because I have harasser, I can also shoot them. So that the top of the table, if somebody's going to come after that marauder and says, "I'm going to charge you," okay, you know, I'll take it. And now if I range reaction attack, then I'm stuck there, and there's going to be a melee later. If I do nothing because I'm either on delay or I'm second player, then I'm going to break off from them and I'm going to shoot them in the face. If they, I can also evade their charge, and let this sort of thing happen. And because I have like cavalry, I can pick the distance that I go back. I don't have to go back at 10 inches plus D6. I can go back as little or as much as I want, up to 10 inches plus D6. So I can control. I can't be thrown off the table typically, or chased into a bad situation, because I can control and still, after evading, unlike other models, shoot somebody in the face. So they're hard to pin down. And but you could have a model with all of that except like cavalry, and be able to perform essentially the same function, but you can't do it over the same range of the table that you can do it with a cavalry model. And so if you are okay with never map moving faster than speed 7, theoretically you can save yourself some points and uh, you know not run into the issue that you have of, I don't think this is worth it, except that if I'm the cavalry model and I'm 10 inches away, or I'm the cavalry model and I am 15 inches away from a guy who moves 7, I've got all kinds of options they don't have. They can't even reach me. I could choose to charge them or not. I could choose to go somewhere else without, being concerned about them charging me on their turn, if they go first. So you're not wrong that, all things being equal, which there never are, two models where somebody's got cavalry and move speed 9 or 10 and the other model doesn't, is only the only value of those points is the speed, because the knockdown thing isn't a big a deal. If you sort of wish away for a moment that we're on a clear table and there's no terrain, so the 50 mil base is not that big a deal either. There are talents that these models have that only cavalry models can have. It only makes sense for a cavalry model to be given lance, so only the mounted models get shock. Only mounted models are generally fast enough to get hit and run. Only mounted models can have light cavalry. And so the models that are shown here all have, the Grular models, because I think we were talking about Grular that day, all have talents on them that only cavalry, or in some cases fast models, because you have weird things like Ventarks and demons. But right now we're just talking about cavalry models. Only cavalry models can get. These foot models can't get those because they're either not fast enough or not cavalry. And so if you're inclined to launch yourself into the enemy as quickly as possible every chance you get, then a force made up of cavalry models that have hit and run and light cavalry, probably, I'm not picking on anybody in particular, I just said that's the collective view, not a person, it's probably not going to be super valuable. So so what else can I tell you? So it's true that on the surface, a completely theory crafting look at two models where the only difference is cavalry. The only thing you're getting for your points is the additional speed, and the additional ability to pursue faster, or get away further when a combat goes really well for you or really badly. And maybe those points aren't worth it. But when it comes to things like hit and run, like cavalry, and those talents only cavalry can have, they start to bring in some value. So it might be that, like, I see hit and run in a model that's not cavalry, like the Ventarks, then I'm thinking it's not unique to cavalry. That's true because there's monsters in the world. It's a fantasy game, but typically that's only going to be in a cavalry model. So,
John, do you mind if I throw something out really quick?
Oh, please go ahead.
You keep saying base size, and you've brought that up a number of times. For newer players, there are a number of talents in the game that say your base size or smaller, and so that
Right.
but you can't affect them for whatever reason. I think subdue might be one of those. I can't remember. So the
There's
base
a couple.
size actually makes you immune to a number of different talents and things like that. So that's an important factor as well with the Cav.
Yep. Yeah. Beyond, you're right. Absolutely right, Jeff. That's a good point. Beyond just blocking somebody, from a space with a base size like that. Then, because that comes up with the Zacralash, the demon that you can cast with the Grular Warlock. He's not very fast, and so if he's anywhere near any terrain, because he has to be, 6 inches away from you, but 6 inches away from the enemy, he's not in maneuver range of the enemy when he's cast. Unlike other things like animal swarms and what have you. But he's a blocker. I mean, he can get those charges off 10 inches in open terrain, but he is a I used to cast my Zacklash to get people from contacting my Warlock. Here, I'll just stand behind this thing, or I'm in a campaign and there's two D18 Night Hunters out there, on game 6 of a campaign, and I really don't want to be shot at by them, so there's like a stack of dudes all hiding behind my Zacklash. So they have different roles that sometimes aren't super obvious when you first just open the book and look at the faction stat summary. And Jeff's, pointing out one of those areas where those things are small, but they make a difference. So
I guess one of the things you're talking about, like the theory crafting with the individual models, and it's no secret. I've tried to play the Gular for a little while. I've been starting to play the Mershale here a little bit more lately, but one of the big things when you were talking about it's not about what they do in a vacuum; it's what they do as a whole. The Grular that I have noticed, I feel like if you try to do cavalry based Grular, you usually end up with less units on the table than most of your opponents. So when I think about playing the Grular and think about the cavalry model in general, typically my mind goes to you want to try to do flank tactics or try to spread your opponent out and pick off the weaker pieces, or try to single them out and try to take them out with these cavalry models. The issue that I keep running into is that none of my opponents ever really do that. They try to get to the objectives. Usually, terrain kind of blocks most of the movement pieces. I don't think that with the cavalry models of the Grular that we have enough models on the board to be able to do that kind of control. Because at least in my opinion, I feel like the cavalry pieces are. You want them to be ready to go out and try to pick off these flankers or pick off these units, or try to sideswipe and take care of some flank sides. But there's not enough of the meat and potatoes force going after objectives in order to either keep your opponents busy or to set up these you don't have the ability to control a fight and pick a fight and allow your other units to be able to come in on the flank or to come in and set up. I feel like having the cavalry has caused less units on the table, so it's harder to do things like objectives, especially whenever you have to do hold actions in order to even do the in-phase special actions. Playing objectives is incredibly difficult with them. Because half the time you don't get to even participate in phase objectives if it requires a special action and you're trying to fend them off. And with less models on the board, it's harder to kind of corral your opponent where you want to use for him to be in order for you to be able to pull off the tactics for it.
So when as you know, I have a entirely mounted. And I would say that if I were going to play an entirely mounted Grular as a newer player, there's no doubt that's a challenge. The factions are not created equally in and their ability for a newer player to understand how they're supposed to work internally. Some are, because if we're standing at the booth at a convention and somebody comes up and says, "Hey, I took a demo of your game. I'm really interested. I'm kind of new. So what faction do you recommend I start out with?" The answer is usually Haradel, because it's super forgiving, and it's not it doesn't rely on a lot of finesse and positioning. It's kind of a blunt instrument, because Arc are to a similar degree. Not exactly the same way, but for similar reasons. So it is absolutely simpler, I think I can say that, to play a Haradellan force, more straightforward, than to play a all-mounted or mostly mounted Grular force. And one interesting thing that guys at Studio Tomahawk do is when their faction books come out, they rate them in terms of their complexity, to kind of warn the player that if you're taking on, Vikings are, stomping into, the center of the other guy's force and lay waste with your double-handed axes. But if you're playing some of these others that require a little bit of finesse and subtlety to play, they get a higher rating in terms of their complexity. We might take a look at doing something like that. Colin and I talked about it once. I think we might do that to help the players, but that doesn't help you right now because you own Grular, and we need to help you out with that. When I play mounted Grular, and really when I play anybody, somebody in my free band's got the duty to stop whatever they were doing and be Mr. Go get the loot marker. So if I'm playing a scenario where I've got to go, I would probably not take an entirely mounted Grular force into a competition, because, especially if I don't know the scenarios, because mounted guys do suck at picking up loot markers and interacting with certain things. So,
and that's yeah, and another thing, like that, especially if you have to divert one of your pieces. Like I said, most of the times when you play higher mounted forces, you usually do have those lesser models. Even putting one person away can be super detrimental to the strategy. It feels like that.
Yeah, I would be fine taking. I do have an all-mounted Grular force with the followers are also all-mounted raiders, but that you're absolutely right that makes you cover less ground model-wise on the table. You cover plenty of space, but you don't cover it in terms of models. You're going to somewhat generally be outnumbered. That's a true statement. But even the mix, which is like 2/3 mounted and 1/3 on foot, you are in, until you have things the way you want them, you are denying the other player what they are trying to do. So if somebody's coming up, if we're playing Frontier and there's the 3 objectives across the front, I'm going to pick the times where I'm within 3 of each of these things, so he can't get any victory points until it's time to settle up. So it's the wrong way to say it. If you're in a game and you have struggled to pick off a couple of his hero models or settle up with them on your terms before it gets towards the end game, like a horse on foot that's got a lot of archery in it, but the archer models aren't great fighters. There's going to be when a clash comes, you've got to have even things out in your favor. The advantage the cavalry has is you get to pick. Generally speaking, you should be picking where the fights occur, because they can't get to you unless you choose to let them get to you, right? And you can use the Marauder's ability to avoid combats or back out of combats, but still get to where you're within 3 of your objectives or deny objectives so that they can't generate victory points until you've got, your guys kind of ganged up, the way you want them.
And that's again I'm trying not to focus on the super Grular, but in the case of the Grular, that's kind of again the problem that I'm kind of running into is like you've got 2/3 of your guys are cavalry and only 1/3 are not. Your Marauders don't really want to stay in combat, and your Impalers only want to at the start of the movement don't really want to be there because you want to be able to help pull some of the aggro off of your guys that are on the foot. And the Raiders, the times that I've had them, again, with having the elusive and the harasser to try to get the most value out of, them to be able to get the attacks, they don't like to be up and close in the front of the fight either. Typically, I don't know if it's just because I'm not super aggressive with them, but I'm never really in a position where the speed of the cavalry has been, and the ability for the cavalry to come in after the main force comes in. I've never really been in that position where that's been helpful, because usually most of the time that's been pushing in has been like maybe core con and then like 4 followers. And then, I mean, that's pretty much the brunt of your non-force models. And, they're going to start getting surrounded, and that's when you need your cavalry to come in from the sides and be able to tear off. But I never end up getting in that situation. I end up having to spread everybody thin to help cover all the grounds, and then it ends up just turning into, half the guys are in melee, half the guys are not, and one-on-one fights, and in which case it's just not, they don't have the abilities to get in and out of those fights other than maybe like the impalers.
What do you think about? Yeah, because I'm picturing it as, when I play the mounted Grular, I'm just trying to create that one opportunity very early on where the Impaler and my Core Con both hit the same guy, because there are so few models in the game that can resist that attack. I mean, we could spend all day talking about I have bad luck, I roll bad dice, but on in expected value situations, an Impaler charge and a Core Con charge hitting the same model is extremely hard to resist, and God help them if they fail a morale test. So, because you're going to do more than you take probably anyway, and that guy is going to be at least take a morale test if they're not dead. And if they're a 2-wound model with medium armor, it's just worse. Maybe a 3-wound knight could take one of those charges. So your Marauders are not letting them, and I know we can go back and forth all day, but I do this, that doesn't work for me, or I do that, I do that to counter it. So back and forth, I know it's not going to be very helpful. What I might suggest is, and I'll talk to Colin and Matt about it, what we probably ought to do is get a web camera on a game and play mounted Grular, or mostly mounted Grular, against someone, or maybe even do it where we're not like not just recording it, but we do it where people can, like right now, like we, if I had the webcam set up differently so you could see the whole 4x4, and we had a couple people over here, we could play a game with those forces and even slow it down to where, you make a move, or let's say the other player rolled high and they went first that turn. And so now it's the Grular player's turn, and the Grular player stops and says, okay, this is a situation I'm faced with. We're playing Frontier or Domination or, Skirmish or whatever the scenario is. And so base, and you could pick who the other side was. It could be Haradel or Kuzark, wherever the, arch nemesis of Grular is thought to be, or whoever makes using cavalry the hardest, and, talk through, all right, I'm going to go ahead and start making these moves. The reason why I'm doing this with my Marauder is this. The reason why this guy's going here is that, and play it out while people are there to be able to ask questions and interact. So we'll work, because that's going to be more useful than, I do this. Well, I'd hit you with my 8 Talsitar, whatever. So you could be in that.
I'd be down to watch you guys definitely do something like that. But moving back to the higher end of the cavalry piece, another thing that I've in the speed aspect, especially when it comes to just cavalry models in general, a lot of the objectives we have the thing of, you can't capture the points on turn 1, and typically with like the 6x4 boards, the objectives are, what has it been, 18 inches from the table edge. Yeah, so your turn 1, obviously your cavalry guys are going to get almost to the other side of the board as much as possible. And I think what did we play the other night? Domination with Jackson. And I can get to the other side quickly as possible, but if he's got sort of just kind of a mixed army, sprinting to to take their side and hold their side. Yes, I get to control the battle over there, but nobody is capturing any points turn one. And a lot of my cavalry end up just being kind of out there. I don't know if maybe if being that super aggressive to try to control the opponent's objective points is really bad turn one, especially since you're not supposed going to be capturing that point, because they're going to just sprint to their side. Everybody's just going to try to sprint around or towards the middle or towards the objectives turn one. So that I don't feel like that speed turn one is incredibly helpful. I can see how it can be somewhat helpful, but that, I don't know, I feel like there's a level of that, especially with not being able to take the objective turn one, that that cavalry loses a lot of that objective position. They want to be, I feel to me, they want to be on that objective and be able to hold so they can do whatever special objective that they've got to do.
Yeah. So that's a really good point. And in fact, the difference in movement ability between a Grular, Marauder or Ventark Space Force and a Haradellin without Knights of Vaslar is substantial. And in fact, the reason why you can't generate points from objective on turn one is in these scenarios is because the top end speed force and the bottom end speed force are far enough apart that it wouldn't be fair. We in fact missed one and didn't get that rule into one of the rules text for one of the scenarios and played at a tournament and had a game go very badly because we weren't doing our due diligence on that. So because we are not, playing a game where everybody has equal access to cavalry models, because we want there to be a couple of the more cavalry-based forces. Although remember, this game here, there's still bands of adventurers. This isn't the Mongol horde invading Russia. That comes later, So we will do that. It'll be a thing. In fact, I have enough, mounted Gular models here to because we're working on free captains to put an entirely mounted Gular free captains force on the table. It's kind of a scary sight, but the difference between the faction with the most movement challenges and the one with the most speed is great enough that we have to account for that first turn, movement forward. Now you can still do that with cavalry and get across there and make it hard for the slower force to get to a center line objective or set of objectives. But they're going to, even the speed 5 knights are going to launch forward 10 inches on that first turn and be in strike range. And any force that's one dimensional, anything all cavalry, all speed 5, all this, all that, and there's no other things going on for it is going to be more challenged across a broad range of scenario types than one that's got a piece of this, a piece of that. Even if they're predominantly one thing, they've got some other tools, and that's why I would never probably go into a competition myself with an all mounted force. I might not go into one now with an all unmounted force either. But you can, as an example, with Grular playing a scenario like Frontier or Skirmish, you could throw yourself at or near or across the center line. If it were me and I were going to do that, it's really terrain and enemy dependent, but if I were going to do that generally, my Marauders would be what would be out in front, because I generally can't control who's going to be first player next turn. So if they are, the Marauders can take it and back off or use their light cavalry power to evade. And I've still got my heavy hitters in either camped on the objectives or in strike range to hurt somebody who tries to get to them, or the Marauders block people from being able to get them. But
that's usually how I use them, is to try to just kind of screen a little bit and take a few pop shots in the first, because they've got that infiltrate that allows them to move so far up. And that's usually what I end up doing with them. But once they start sprinting forward and stuff, they've got to pull back.
Yes, but nobody's really better at pulling back than a Gular Marauder.
No kidding.
they get to pick where they go to do it, and they get to shoot you in the face as they leave. So that's that's the intent there. In terms of
So Blade Rider sounds like they're pretty close too.
Again,
Blade Riders, they're
yes,
really good at doing that too.
Absolutely, very good at it.
So, yeah, it's just the moving up early just doesn't seem, and I discussed this with Matt Budney too whenever we were talking about some of the stuff. The like mounted caster, like the mounted warlock. I personally don't see a benefit to having the mounted marauder unless you are taking an all mounted force, because again, if you move him up there faster than the rest of your units, he's going to be the closest target for archers to start picking off.
Yeah,
I've heard that problem a lot.
Just because you have speed 10 doesn't mean you need to use it every time. So I love my mounted warlock. We did that earlier than I thought we were going to do it, and I got that guy painted right away, because the ability to pick where I am over a much greater range of options compared to a caster on foot, that's the amazing thing to me. But that's side to side. He's not leading this charge.
And see, like in reverse for me, I'm the complete opposite, because most of the casters are low stat lines, AV and defense. So I want to make sure that there's guys in front of them to be able to block line of sight or take shots without having to do a targeting test early. So and this isn't to try to go on to the way you were talking about earlier about whether it's worth it or not. But like the extra speed on that feels like if I had to pick, like if I was forced into a mounted warlock, like versus a not mounted, like if I had to take it, I would probably just pick a different caster. The cavalry version of it, that extra speed, I don't feel tactically is something in its favor.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say there, what I was trying to say earlier, probably didn't do a very good job, is you can't have two models, all things being equal, and one speed 10 and one speed 7 to be the same cost.
Right.
They're going to be that right there. It's going to be different cost, right? We don't have to talk about what it is, but it won't be the same, because that's obvious. Right. Okay. So the guy they're both, they're casters, they're AV2, I'm not saying the warlock is. Let's take two, naked paper doll casters. They're AV2, discipline D8, defense 4. They've got a stick, the ability to cast some magic, card 10, and some one other talent, tree bond, or whatever it is, fear craver. So they've got their one talent, their magic, and their kind of naked stat line, and then you give one a horse, so he's going to be more expensive. The difference between 10 and 7 is, we could argue all day about what value we should give that. And that's what I was saying earlier, is we're not going to do that, but it has to be greater than 1, so greater than the other, it has to be greater than the other. That comes down to, if they were all things being equal, we just had that exact conversation I was talking about earlier. To me, the ability to be able to pick my caster up after I've cast, pick my new location, because the way Freeblades is done, you're setting yourself up in your movement phase for your next cast. And my range of ability to pick where I'm going to be to put my Zacralash down or cast my choke or whatever it is I'm doing, soul rip, because that's awesome. Whatever it is I'm out there to do, I have a better ability to choose that, or to get myself the hell out of trouble, than I do if I'm a foot model. And so I love that. You don't. That's cool. You can say, all right, you're right. I mean, if he's a cavalry guy, he's going to be more expensive because he's speed 10. The other guy's 7. You can't make him the same cost. I'd rather have the foot model. That's awesome. The tactical conversation is, I like it better not because I can go out in front of my guys. Nope. I'm not setting my warlock. Funny story about warlocks, before they became mounted, for like the first 5 or 6 years of Freeblades, I swear to God, every photo I saw of a Grular warlock, he was standing on top of a terrain feature. They were on hills, and whatever game we were playing, whatever con we were at, every Grular player found a way to get his Warlock into a mountain. Why? I don't know. Probably produced 10 or 15 photos of Grular Warlocks on ridges and hills and roofs of buildings and whatever the hell else.
Nature's too cool not to have out there in the open like that.
Right? The guy's awesome.
Right.
So I'm gathering up all your failed morale tests. Woo!
But,
So
yeah, one of the issues that I ran into running the mounted Warlock 2 especially is that the elevation, and because it does have the larger base, and it does have the higher elevation than the other targets, it does cause some range fire issues.
Yep.
With it.
And it's worse now with the stalker out there. Be careful, boys and girls.
Yeah.
Just as a stalker player,
Yeah, Ben's a stalker player.
Yeah, yes, I am.
So,
and I appreciate the change. Thank you so much.
For Corey.
Yep.
We can talk about that, after this part, but about why that got done. I got some, because it's an insight into why we make decisions we do, and I would love to hear some feedback about it. So we can table that for a second, but we'll come back to it. And there's a lot of just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. You should do a thing. Just because you have speed 10 doesn't mean you have to go speed 10 every single time. A lot of times people look at and I'll see it in demos too, which is why I'm really glad we've gone. One of the many reasons I'm glad we've gone to the new model stat cards is you'll see players at demos, brand new, maybe not brand new to games, probably not, but brand new to Freeblades sitting there, and they're reading every word of the talents on their stat card because they feel this compelling need. I've got to use every one of these this turn, and I don't know, it's not made that way. The game is built so that there's a design element of there's about 5 or 10% of your points that you may use very rarely in given scenarios or not use at all. And same is true of the other side for different reasons. So pressure to I've got this speed. I got to get out there. It's like, your follower. You're me. I'm playing Haradel right now. You got all these muster threshers. They're speed 7 and my knights are speed 5. Well, we got to make use at speed 7. No, you will die. Stop. You're a follower. So start following. Because I don't care if you got speed 7, you get ahead of me. You're kind of behind my speed 5 until it starts to matter, unless you're on some separate loot spree mission. You got to stay, behind me until we clash. Otherwise, you're just going to die. You're going to get murdered. So even though they do have speed 7, and the same thing I think is true sometimes with some of these cavalry models. I'm speed 10. I gotta go. I gotta go make speed 10 work. There's times to use it and times not to, and they're probably.
Yeah. And like I know you said in a vacuum, that's we can't really compare on that. It just feels like in a tactics sense, like especially with like Corcon and the Warlocks themselves, like they other than the speed, they like the Impalers and the Marauders and the Blade Riders and the Ricticars, they all get something because they're on the cavalry, other than just the cavalry tagline. From a tactics perspective, if we're not trying to push and be aggressive with the speed, and I know that that's not exactly the best strat, I get that. But I, as a tactics standpoint, in a whole, don't see a huge boon to taking a cavalry versus the on-foot models where I could save me some gold to buy some equipment, possibly.
Yep.
So just even from the tactics perspective, because it doesn't, other than just getting the cavalry tagline, they do the exact same thing on foot, and other than getting the speed. With the rest of the Grular.
So one thing I think we learned though is I think it's going to be super useful to play a game with mounted Grular on one side and then not mounted force on the other. So we're going to put that on our list of things to make happen. I don't know how quickly we can do it. But another thing that comes to mind is Dan, you're here, right? Dan Rains? You on lurking or available to unmute?
Yes, I'm here.
Do you remember we played a game of Caravan Ambush where I was a mounted Grular? Do you remember that?
Yeah, when you schooled me.
Well, okay. That's the end of my question. No, seriously. I felt like because of the nature of what I had as a force, I was really picking what happened.
Yeah, you directed that engagement. with the ability to maneuver your horses at great distances, where you can pick off and pick the fights and block off who I could bring back in because of the base sizes.
Right. Okay. So, what I think, would you agree to be useful if we got a whoever we get involved in doing it, if we get a game together here, pick a time where we could get as many people as we could to watch it, and then also record it that had, and we walk the dog, like we said, okay, we just rolled initiative. It's turn one. I'm the Grular player. I'm first player, and this is what I'm planning on doing. This is how I see what's in front. We get the whole table. Brad and Ben and other interested people can pick the other side, the scenario we play. They can give us, we can even talk about what kind of terrain we want to put on, and then play it out and have, kind of a discussion, not just a game, just a battle report where two people play the game, but talk
teaching
about,
game.
Yeah, why you're making the choices that you do.
It would be great to see a high level plays like that because especially when we're kind of still playing.
I don't know what
amongst ourselves. But like to be able to see some tactics and some decisions, because like I tried to get some practice in with Matt Budney one time, a couple early parts of January, just to try to start prepping for the Marsing, and I had this Grular list, and I was like, all right, I feel pretty confident about it, and it became very evident turn one that I had no idea what it was I was doing, even though I thought that I knew what I was doing. It just there's a huge difference in what I think is a good play and what's actually a good play. So it would be nice to see some high level, some gameplay from some.
High level. Well, we have access to here is a DGS staff, but we'll make two. Maybe we'll have some high level commentary. And Matt Budney's got the characteristic of having walked in and out of the Thunderdome here more than once, so he's. So, I think he was also in that Caravan Ambush game. Now that I think about it,
yeah, that was a good game.
All demons.
That was a good game. It was a great game. So that's the thing. We'll do that. I don't know how quickly we can put that together. We don't want to do it super quickly because we want plenty of time to tell.
Yeah, no rush.
Get people's schedules to get as many people. We'll record it, but I think people would also, if they can be, they'd like to be a part of it. We'll put on full court press. We'll get over whatever people here we need to that we can do safely with pandemic restrictions and play it out.
So that might be
podcast it while we're doing it. We can do that too.
That would actually be something that would be, and I know we're not really kind of in the any of the subscriber channels or anything like that, but I think that would be really cool. Because I've got your YouTube channel subscribed as well. Like a couple of the games that you guys play, or that you guys maybe play at that tabletop place. And if you have the ability to either stream them or just record them, it's nice to get to see strategies and study, based upon other people are doing and other people are playing it, and then maybe have some content come from that, just to see what other people are doing with their strategies. Because I've still got the Excel spreadsheet from the games people played at the North American tournament, just so that way whenever I look at other armies, I can kind of see, okay, here's what everybody's taking, here's what's not being taken. So that would be an extreme boon to be able to have some games, even if they're just casual games played, to be able to watch.
Yeah.
And see.
It's interesting you say that, because one thing that happened, it was really interesting that I didn't think it through, but I'm kind of glad we did it that way. When we had we were running, because of the nature of the pandemic and what have you, we did the North American Championships here on Discord through Tabletop Simulator. Now this is just one person's view. I'm really glad people are getting to play Freeblades however they play it, but I'm a miniatures gamer, and I also have the luxury of we have a limited number. We keep the numbers down, but we do have a couple people over to play games face to face here. And recently, Tabletop and Cardboard Corner have reopened, and so we're back to our normal Tuesday nights. It's not the same. People are wearing masks, and it's every other table. So there's not as many tables available as there had been in the past, but it's something, and not everybody has that luxury. So it's kind of awesome. So whether we could do that hookup at Tabletop or not, we will investigate that. We can certainly do it here. and have a couple people over and put that on here. Or maybe we start here and get the gear ready and then transport it to tabletop after we test everything out and do some sound checks and some other things to make sure we can control the noise. And it's not the most acoustically viable place in the world, So we will take that on as a challenge. I think that would be really cool. It's also cool just hanging out with you guys, sitting there talking about tactics. But when we had those games on at the North American Championships, a bunch of people were here at the headquarters, and we had the games up on a big screen, and we were muted. We could listen to what they were saying. We could see their moves, but they weren't obviously going to be distracted by us doing anything. So we had all that off. And we were talking about the moves they were making and the choices that they had and that sort of thing. And a couple of people have said to me, they learned more about Freeblades, kind of the tactics of Freeblades, from listening to people talk about a couple of great players playing the game than they had the whole rest of the time they've been playing. So I do think it's a really useful, whether any individual comment's great, whether the commenters know what they're doing, but the ability to kind of get in that give and take and get in that conversation, I think would really be more helpful in some set piece things, and stuff like that. And I know there's people, and I'm one of them, super willing to slow it down, and talk about, okay, here I am. I've got my mounted warlock. This is what I'm doing. I'm doing it because I'm speed 10. I couldn't do that if I was speed 7. Or, I went 3 turns and never did anything that used my speed, so maybe I should relook that or whatever, and invite other people to ask questions about those moves and comment. Why'd you do that? I get a lot of those questions.
Yeah, John, one of the things that I think I enjoyed most of all the stuff you've published, it was one of the earliest videos you did, but it was Julie playing. I can't remember who she was playing, but you were kind of there commentating the game, talking about tactics as they were playing. And it was a great learning experience for me.
Oh yeah. That's her son, Jacob. I remember that.
There's no better, just,
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, I've watched a couple things on the YouTube channel. Like there's nothing better than, it's like watching high level chess players, and having those commentators running, you learn something just from watching that level of experience of, like you said, 40 years of miniatures playing. You watch that and oh, cool, I didn't know you could do that. Or, oh, cool, that was a cool setup. There's some cool combos.
So,
you get that feedback.
Yep. Hey, Matt Budney, you on? I know he's working, so he might not be able to come to the microphone. But we did a game here between him. It was a campaign game between him and Aaron Newell. And
I'm here.
Hey, we recorded that game between you and Aaron, right? The one that took place over the inn, the campaign game.
Yeah, I thought they got posted on YouTube. Matter of fact, I'm almost positive that's on your channel.
I'll have to look. I'm not looking at the
That's
moment.
where the archer killed the mounted knight, isn't it? Or something like
yes,
that?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Check your playlist. I think it's listed as one of the playlists.
If it's not there, we'll get it there. But that was also one we were also, the commentary of the one between Julie and Jacob was pretty serious. We were deliberately recording a game for demo purposes and talking about each individual thing. The one where Matt and Aaron are playing, because we're all buddies here, was kind of like all a grab ass along with any useful tactical commentary. But there is some, hey, why we do that? What's your choices here? And Matt and Aaron kind of talked them through. So I think that one's good too. If it's not on there, we'll get it on there. But if it is already, it's just something we got to find. But if it's not, we'll make sure it gets uploaded. Because I know we recorded it. I'm just going to go and look for where it is. And I also know we had some trouble with the what's the word I'm looking for? It's not the deck, but the way the video is translated to the codec to upload it at some point. I don't know if that was one of the videos we had trouble with, but regardless, we ought to be doing more of them anyway. And we can, I think if I take anything out of this discussion at the top of the list, it's going to be, let's put those things into practice, because I think they'd be really helpful to people. And we can make them happen here. So.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm down. If there's anything I can do on that front to help, I'll
well, once we'll get our act together first. We'll sit down and talk about who could come over and what we're going to do, and then what we'll look for from you guys is, okay, we're going to have all or mostly Grular on one side. Tell us who you'd like to see on the other side, the point value in the scenario, and we'll do that one first. And then what we'll do is we'll nominate other situations as other people say, hey, I don't know how to use the such and so, or I'm having really trouble with the treasure hunt scenario, or whatever their challenges are. We'll take them one at a time until we knock them all out. So just let us know what think about it, and let us know what other free band point value and scenario you'd like to see Grular, mounted Grular in.
Okay. Cool.
And if I play them on Grular and I get my ass kicked, you're allowed to say, I told you they sucked, right? Absolutely. I will take it. So
for what it's worth, I played I think I'm at Bundy, forgive me if I'm wrong, in the camp raid scenario, and I played my Faltaran force against an entirely mounted Grular force, and he absolutely rolled me with them.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things going on there. One is it's absolutely true that not every free band performs exactly the same in every scenario. Some free bands are generally a little better at one, and we faced that when we first designed the game, and trying to fix that, you'd have to genericize your free band so badly it just wasn't worth it. So we did two things about it. One is we made sure that it wasn't a lot. So if Haradel maybe has a little bit of an advantage in skirmish, it's not a big advantage. It's not a statistically significant advantage over time. And when we do competitive events, we make absolutely sure there's a balance. If you play 3 straight skirmishes, be all Haradel and Kazark all the time, that's boring. So you have to adapt to those situations. You could be a Haradel in force, but also be adaptive to if all I knew I was going to play is skirmishes, I'd take my force differently than if I was going to go into a situation where we're going to roll the die and pick the scenario that night. Although I'll tell you, my muster archers are killing so many people. I take them whether I play Blue Spree or not. Just a thing. So just to piss Jennifer off. But let's do that, and you guys think about what this scenario and the point. I guess 250, unless you want to do that differently, and then what bad guys and what scenario you want. We'll play that one first.
Jon, a little bit in that vein that might be cool to see would just be really short snippets of how different talents work for new players. Like, hey, this is how Blade Dancer works. The normal engagement is this, but if you're a Blade Dancer, you could do this.
Yep.
Absolutely. I would love to see that, because we get turned around on these talents all the time. We kind of nicknamed them the exceptions to the rules. Well, so instead of saying talent, we say, what exceptions do you have?
That's what all talents are, So absolutely. And so let's take, we got a couple nominations. So Blade Dancer was one. We had that whole blow up on rules.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Hey, we're here to help people play, understand. We'll fix the rules when we get a sentence poorly constructed. We'll do whatever. Last perfect game designer died 2,000 years ago. We're not gonna act like we got it exactly right. We're gonna take the players' feedback and make it better every chance we get. So totally fine. Do what you're doing. So Blade Dancer's one. Is there another one out there?
Taunt.
Yeah.
Taunt. Oh my gosh. Taunt's awesome. Okay, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Okay. I tend, and it's a style thing. When I play Grular, I tend not to taunt. My taunt is my Korkon charging the shit out of you,
Yeah, I did that a couple times as a taunt, and I failed the taunts, and I'm like, this replaces your entire activation. If you fail a taunt, you don't do anything.
It's like me when I try to delay my Blackthorn 3, 3, 3. That's all I ever roll, So, and then I'm standing there looking like an idiot. So
yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not a huge fan of taunt. Well, if we're getting kind of off topic, like just because it replaces your entire activation if you fail.
Yeah. So now here's the other thing about the design of the game. There are in any given list combination, there's a 5% or so set of. It's kind of the same way the spell lists are designed. There's a 5% or so, maybe a little bit bigger, 7% somewhere there, of your value is in things that are hugely situational. Well, hugely is too strong. That are definitely situational. A taunt is situational.
Yep.
You know, it's that one time to use. You've knocked down their discipline somehow, or you've they're also sometimes they're investments in the future. So when we first released the game, I got all this flack about contain on the Trillion Enforcers. The first release was Black Rose, Harrodell, Grular, and Trillions. And the Trillion Enforcers have contain. And the Blade Dancer was besides the Duelist, were the Mist Dancers. I'm paying for this, power, and I never get to use it. And right? So what you do as a designer who's also a gamer is the very next thing you do is you go out and you play that force publicly somewhere. And you contain the shit out of people. Oh, that didn't suck. So it was an investment in the future where you see that I'm probably not going to beat a lot of Trillion on Trillion games. And Duelist is not going to be that big a deal to me. But by gosh, when the Blade Dancers start becoming a little bit more of a thing, or other people that have elusive, Night Whispers, things like that, the fact that they, can't get away with that for free on 2 of my models is not a small deal, and so I had that same player come back to me and goes, oh, you knew what was coming out. I said, yeah, most of these factions were written in 2010. And we play tested them all against each other, and we're going to release them, one at a time after the first 4. But we didn't want to box ourselves into a corner and go back, oh, I need to go back and put contain that guy. No, we put it on the beginning. So taunt is a super situation. Generally, you want to keep your Korcon moving. That's that one time where you've made it super reliable, and it totally the pain of you not moving isn't a big deal. But if you get that guy to come after you, it is a big deal.
I love doing it to just followers. Just
you're not paying a lot for taunt. That's all I'll say about that too.
Yeah, I love just doing it if there's like a hero and like 2 followers, and like you just want to just pull them off and just pile them on.
Yep.
Also, most casters only have D8 discipline, so bear that in mind.
Yep. The last time he did it was against my caster.
Yep. Pulled it straight out. Came right at him. Another talent I'd like to see on the list, possibly the fly and swoop stuff.
Yes, I was actually about to ask that one myself.
Well, swoop is very rarely used, but fly's getting more and more common. So we'll do both.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, it's the swoop in the movement phase stuff is the one that makes it weird.
And swoop's super situational. That's good. It's just like taunt. You're going to use it when somebody, the situation presents itself. It's like ideal. Otherwise, you're going to be flying around charging people and going into combat and stuff like that. Another thing about the talents is we have to be sensitive to the fact that the game is meant to be played campaign as much as competitive. And taunt gets way better after a couple of discipline upgrades. And so way more reliable. So remember that there's going to be these things that you see them and you go, I don't know why I'm getting a lot out of that. And then 4 games into a campaign, holy crap, So there's also an element of that factored into who has what and why they have it. Because we do want people to be as interested in playing campaign games as they do one-offs, and be rewarded for it to the same level.
I'd agree with that, John. Like, I think nothing is useless in the game. And the reason I say that is we play a campaign and the first thing my leader gets is knowledge, +1 knowledge. And I go, oh, that's shit. And then the next game, he's got to do a test with that knowledge. And I'm like, oh, and he passes, right? And he wouldn't have if he didn't get it. So it's that's.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think there's any really talents that are just straight useless.
Well, so you're going to have to take into account Julie's swim team.
Yes, I was going to say.
I feel like there's more to that story.
Yeah. I do too.
You want to tell it there, Blade Mother?
Oh, sure. So, we just restarted the campaign in Kansas City, Skittering in the Darkness. And my first game, I won the game and I got all these great advancements. And, out of 6 or 7 advancements that I rolled a 1 on a D30 on 3 of them. And so my choices are are climb, jump, and swim. And 2 of the 3 models are already free runners, and one's even a leaper. So I just gave them.
You have an Olympic team.
So they're all swimmers. So I'm hoping Matt's going to have some like underground pools in this campaign somewhere, because then we'll be some use.
So
my new. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. When Tabletop reopened, it reopened in conjunction with a cafe, Cardboard Corner, a board oriented cafe, but still super supportive of all kinds of gaming and game oriented, in terms of the way it's laid out and the things you can do with the space. And one of those things there is a dice jail. It is a wall space that's 2 plexiglass sheets with bars through them, separated by about, I don't know, Julie, 6 inches, and maybe it's 4 or 5 feet tall.
Yeah.
I feel like one of you guys uploaded a picture of that.
Yeah, we had Julie dropping her D30. It's the first D30 in the dice jail because 3 1s in one night is just too much.
Yep. I think I remember seeing that picture.
Yeah,
that was funny.
So, and I agree with it. I agree with Andrew Weber. You got knowledge ups and spirit ups. The one time you make fun of it, the next time you're taking a spirit test on a spell. You're taking a morale test, and because you went to D10, you're getting a +1. I will say though that that doesn't apply to my muster archers, because as soon as they don't get a RAR up, they're off to the University of Herodellen on a full ride, and that's how I end up with my one guy at the end of the campaign, but he's a RAR D14. So
my Rick Lotar got pick a talent, so I took agile charge on him, and it's disgusting.
I bet that's fun.
That's what absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah. So the earlier on, before we're past the hour, I'm going to stay, as long as people want to talk. I know people are going to be coming and going. I think we got to mostly what you guys were asking about, but I think we're really going to get to that by, playing some, learning games, whatever you want to call them, demonstration games of these issues that you want to see on the table and the choices people make. Whatever we call those, I think that's going to be super useful. And we'll also video some shorts that are, here's a situation where you'd use Blade Dancer. Also we'd probably have one that goes with it, and here's a situation where you don't, because there's sometimes not to use it, so